Okay, I'm Brahma Tirtha, also known as Bob Cohen, and I was a high school science teacher in the most progressive, modern state in India, Bihar. And I used to visit Calcutta. For those of you who know Kevinter's in Calcutta by Newmarket, it has great milkshakes. So on my trips to Calcutta, I met the devotees, and they invited me to Mayapur for the first Mayapur festival, where I was the only guest at the first festival. And there were 70 very excited devotees and one guest, and that was me. So in order to protect me, I figured, Prabhupada kept me in his hut for several days, and there was Malati, who was cooking for Prabhupada, and Shama Sundar, her husband, was recording. And when I started speaking with Prabhupada, the first conversation wasn't recorded, but the second one, Shama Sundar thought it was interesting and hit the record button, and later, after the conversations, Prabhupada sent me a letter saying he's asked that the book be produced, and he named the book as Perfect Questions, Perfect Answers. So I've had to struggle with that title, so I'll tell you a short story that may be of interest. But first I want to see, can those in back, can you hear me? Okay, whoever cannot hear me, raise your hand. Okay, good. Okay. I did. We got good coverage. You know, Prabhupada named it that way because I accidentally hit the formula. What's the formula for approaching a guru? What's the formula? Yeah, come say.
Submission, inquiry.
What's that? Yeah. So you approach a guru submissively, then you render service, and then what happens? He'll give you the truth. So I approached Prabhupada, wasn't challenging him. I had read the Gita, I had learned the mantra, learned it from a street party led by Jayadvaita Swami in the 60s, but I really hadn't associated with devotees at all. And I accidentally hit the formula. I was helping serve the Bangladesh refugees, which we were doing in Mayapur then, and I thought, I'm not going to challenge Prabhupada. I just want to learn from him, and later I can think about it, because I like thinking about things. So when I hit the formula, with great luck, Prabhupada reciprocated many times over. So now for a little interesting story. So, having my own nature and my own stubbornness, and culturally, I came from a little different background than most of the devotees. Not all, but many came from more what we used to affectionately call, Prabhupada used to call the hippie background. Not having been successful at being a hippie, I had to find myself. And so I really was very fortunate to have His Divine Grace's presence. Then when I came back to America though, I was already engaged to be married. I've been married 45 years now. And my wife's, she knew nothing about Krishna when I came home from India, but she's quite the devotee now. And it was difficult for me. I didn't quite fit in with the devotee culture, and I was in graduate school, which is weird, and I was kind of married, which then was mostly weird. And so I didn't quite fit in. And devotees, some were particularly encouraging to me, like He was Gopal Krishna Adhikari at that time, and a few others are very encouraging. Some devotees, in their infinite wisdom to encourage me, would remind me how fallen I was. Because I had been chanting for like already, by this time I'm mentioning a few, like 74, I'd already been chanting for 16 rounds for a few years. And at that time, you only got initiated. Everyone was initiated within 6 months. So 2 years I'm not initiated. So I was thinking Prabhupada came to the temple in New York and I was going to see him. And I was thinking, and some devotees in their over-enthusiasm had convinced me I wasn't very advanced. That's okay, but maybe I became too convinced. So I was thinking, when Prabhupada comes, I don't want him to see my face. I really don't want him to see my face. So Prabhupada was about to leave his room, and I offered obeisances. And I said the prayers as slow as we can say. Namah, Om, Vishnu, like that. And so by the time I would be on the ground before Prabhupada walked by me, I was in the hallway. And by the time I finished, he'd be in the temple room on the Vyasa-san. That was my plan. Krishna had a different plan. Prabhupada waited until he saw me. I don't know how he saw me, because, you know, when you're looking, devotees offer obeisances, we all look alike when our rear end's in the air and our head's on the ground. I mean, but anyway, Prabhupada saw me and waited until I was done. And then I stood up and he said, "Good to see you." And he gave me a hug, which I found out later, that was a little unusual. And then later on, I was in New Orleans with Prabhupada, and I walk in the back of the room, and Brahmananda, he was Brahmananda Swami then, motioned to me, "Come forward." So I moved forward a few inches. I had no idea what's going on. And he said, "Come forward some more." I motioned, moved forward a few more inches. Again, I have no idea what's going on. Finally said, "Prabhupada wants you to sit right next to him." So I go sit at Prabhupada's feet. It felt so good. And then that happened another time like that. Then it's time for initiation. 1976, the grand Rath Yatra down Fifth Avenue. We have the beautiful relief on the upper floor of the Samadhi of Prabhupada. This was the grand Rath Yatra. We're finally Rath Yatra down the most famous street on the entire planet, Fifth Avenue. Were you there, Malati? Vishaka, you were there? Yeah. You weren't there, Borjan. No. And then after that, 100 devotees are getting initiated. And Prabhupada didn't come to the initiation. He wasn't feeling well, which is a good thing, because you throw 100 bananas in a fire for a room 1/4 this size, it creates an interesting circumstance. And then the next day, Prabhupada is handing out cookies at Vyasa Puja. So I'm quite proud. So I go, I'm thinking, Prabhupada, he gave me a hug. Prabhupada called me twice to sit by him. I'm a pretty important person. And now I've finally become his disciple. He's going to say something to me. And I was feeling pretty good about myself. Very good about myself. So then I went up to get the cookie, and Prabhupada gave me this amazing look, as if I was a piece of clear glass, and looked right through me to everybody else, and as if he didn't see me. That was the most potent look I'd ever received in my life. After that, I learned the lesson that I'm not very special and not very important. It's just built on Prabhupada's mercy. And I'll tell one very brief story, and then then we'll share with others. Because this is relevant for right now. 1977, I'm a scientist, so I was here for the first international conference on life comes from life, which was held in the Gurukula courtyard, and some big scientists from different places in the world came, and Prabhupada's devotee scientists, myself, and Srup Damodar, Brahmachari then, and Sadaputta, and Madhava, and Jnana, we were all presenting papers. And Prabhupada was too sick to come, but in his quarters you can see the bust. There's a bust of his head, and he had us bring that every day. And so one day we walked in, and every night Prabhupada wanted the Sankirtan report. He wanted to know what were the arguments they gave and what were the arguments we gave. So one night we walked in to see him, all the scientists in our suits and ties. Prabhupada could hardly see then. He had to wear dark glasses, and his vision was very, very weak. So Tamal Krishna Maharaj said, "Oh, Prabhupada, your scientists have come." And they're all dressed in suits and ties. So Prabhupada said, "Get them chairs." He didn't want us on the floor in our suits and ties. The problem is, India's kind of a floor culture. We didn't have many, and ISKCON didn't have many chairs. So 2 of us sat on one chair, 2 on another chair, and I think 2 of us just sat down like this, pretending we were on chairs. Knowing Prabhupada couldn't see that well, we didn't know what to do. And then we gave Prabhupada our Sankirtan scores, our arguments and their arguments and the details, and he was very, very pleased with that. So with that, I'll stop here. Thank you very much. You got your own mic, is these working? Is this working? Hello? Hare Krishna. So each of you, yes. She has her own microphone. I don't know if it's not working.
Hare Krishna. Working. This morning when back.
You have to introduce yourself.
Oh. My name is Mokshalaxmi&vishalini. I'm from England. Someone. But I was in India from the beginning of 1975 until for 10 years. Then I went to Mexico, which was a disaster. And then I went to England, where I've been working in the Gurukul for the last 30 years. This morning, and I've done a lot of Padayatra. It's a wonderful service, so all of you who've done Padayatra, I can relate to that. It's a really good service. This morning when Bhakti Maharaj was talking about when Srila Prabhupada left Rishikesh, and he leaned over and he asked Gananava, did we know that Prabhupada was coming? And Gananava, because I was sitting just there so I could see what they were saying. So actually the part of the story that Bhakti Maharaj doesn't know, I can fill in some of the details. What happened was, in the middle, were you all here for Bhakti Chara's talk this morning, the Maharaj's talk? We were talking about how Prabhupada left. Prabhupada had gone to Rishikesh because the weather's cooler there. But there'd been a storm and all the electricity blew out. So then he decided to come back to Vrindavan. And Srila Prabhupada had a Sanskrit scholar that traveled with him called Pradyumna. He wasn't mentioned this morning, but what happened was, thank you. In the middle of the night, like midnight, I used to live at the Goshala, which in those days you could cut across more. Although it was kind of nearer because there were no buildings. So in the middle of the night, there was all this big commotion outside. And the vice president from the temple had come to find me because Pradyumna had just arrived from Rishikesh to tell us that Srila Prabhupada was coming in the morning. And in those days, we didn't keep Srila Prabhupada's quarters ready. When he left, we'd lock them all up. Because there were very few devotees that stayed all the year in those days. We didn't have refrigerators, we didn't have AC. There were a few fans, but we didn't have electricity to run them. So it was quite austere, and it was difficult for devotees to stay all year. So when Prabhupada left, we'd lock up his house. And then when he came, we'd get it ready. So Srila Prabhupada's house was all locked up. So in the middle of the night, there's this big commotion, the chowkidar, some, banging, and they came to get me to get Prabhupada's house ready. So that's how we knew he was coming. And when I went over to Prabhupada's house, because I used to look after it, after Shruti Rupa left, I looked after his house. Previously, I'd done it with her. And when I got there were already piles of devotees wanting to help get Srila Prabhupada's house ready. And I remember, and dust forms really quickly in Vrindavan. You leave your floors for one day and they're full of dust. So this had been locked up for some time. And when I got there, someone had chucked buckets of water all over the floor, because the system, throw a bucket, sweep it, and it goes down a hole. But the thing is, usually those holes are blocked and don't work, so you end up with a big puddle in the middle of the floor. Whereas a much better method is first you get rid of all the dust, and then you put the water. So when I got there was all these big muddy puddles of water all through Prabhupada's house, and it was like, oh my God, what are we going to do? But somehow we managed. And we got Prabhupada's house ready, and it was a really, feeling of camaraderie and happiness because Srila Prabhupada was coming. And, but that kind of changed when Prabhupada arrived, because I remember the car drew up. He was in a car. Well, you know that from Gananava's story with the motorbike. The car drew up at the side gate by the guest house, by Prabhupada's house. And Prabhupada was actually carried in. As I remember it, Brahmananda Maharaj then carried Srila Prabhupada. And I remember it being really shocked that Prabhupada seemed to me, his health seemed deteriorated. So although I was really happy that Srila Prabhupada had arrived, it was very bittersweet because Srila Prabhupada was being carried. And we were also used to Prabhupada's walk. The Prabhupada's walk, chin up, walking stick, very fast walk. Excuse me, so it was very sad in that sense. But at least I got to do it. I think that was the last time I cleaned Prabhupada's house, which was really sad, because after that, Upendra was with Prabhupada, and Prabhupada didn't leave the house so much, so his house was just cleaned while he was in it. Whereas formerly, I would clean Prabhupada's house right after Mangal Artik. I'd go through the back garden way into his house, and Prabhupada would be sitting at his desk, translating, and I'd kind of pitter-patter in, and I'd close the doors between Prabhupada's darshan room and his breakfast room, where the deity is now sitting at there's a little table and a deity of Prabhupada and the palanquins in there now. I'd close those doors, and sometimes I managed it without Srila Prabhupada looking up, but often he'd look up and see me, because I didn't want to cause a fuss. I wanted to be like, the silent housekeeper. So, and then I'd close the doors and pay my obeisances, and then I'd clean Prabhupada's house. So it was nice to be in the house with Prabhupada, even though the door was closed, because I knew he'd be translating. And the only time actually I interacted with Prabhupada in the house was, I'm sure many of you have heard this story, is Shruti Rupa had told me how the marble in Prabhupada's bathroom had become stained from his mustard oil massages. So I was scrubbing away at that marble every day, Indian style, squatting, sari around the knees, and I'd use this white powder, Ajax, Vim, something like that we call it in England. I know they sell it here. And I'd have it all over the bathroom floor, and I'd be scrubbing away, sari around my knees, and the marble was really starting to look beautiful. So one morning I'm doing that, scrubbing away, it's before class, Prabhupada was translating, I thought, and suddenly the doors start to open to the bathroom, and this face comes through with the big eyes. And Prabhupada, always a perfect gentleman, said, "May I come in?" And I was always struck by his wonderful manners, And I said, "Yes, Srila Prabhupada, of course, Srila Prabhupada." And I scurried out, and he went in to use the bathroom. And when I scurried out, I left these big stains from my feet and all over the black stone floor. But when Prabhupada came out, it was as if he'd floated over it. He didn't leave a single stain. I always wondered how he managed that. It's like, he was just a gentleman through and through. But Vijay, do you want to show your photos that you have? My dear god sister Vijay. And Vijay and I lived together at the Goshala, which Srila Prabhupada visited once, to my knowledge. He came over once to see the Goshala. He didn't say a word though. And actually, the day we learned Srila Prabhupada was leaving his body, Vijay and I were, Vijay, Vishalini, who should be here, and I were at the Goshala. And Vishalini and I ran over, but Vijay remained. She was furiously picking the tulsi so that the garlands could still be made. I've never seen anyone, picking furiously, but Vijay wanted to show these photographs. Do you want the microphone? We're sharing you on.
So the day Srila Prabhupada left, we were all in the... have to speak in. Okay, we were all in the temple room, chanting Hare Krishna as the evening wore on. And Srila Prabhupada was there with us at least in his Vapu, he was there. And in the morning was Mangal Arti, and I could hardly wait to see the deities, because I was sure they were going to be as upset at Prabhupada leaving as we were. But Shamasundar looked especially cheeky that morning, as if he said, I have him now. But I have pictures of the deities that morning, because they offered this beautiful set that Lakshmi Moni and maybe Vishwadevi made, and they offered it to the deities. And so I'll pass them around so you get to see Radha Shamasundar as they were the morning that Srila Prabhupada left.
Well, we haven't got much time, so if we all take a story and then we can come back if there's more time. I don't want to take all the time, so I'm going to pass the microphone on. Good job you drank that. I should have just used it.
It wasn't that good.
Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamini Tinamane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharane Nivasesha Sunyavadi Prashkati Desatarane Om Aganatiminandasya Jana Jana Salakaya Chaksu Samilitan Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namah Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Sayam Upakadamayam Dadati Sapandantikam Vanchakalpa Tubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhayevacha Patitanam Pabhinebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah. I would like to say something about the power of Prabhupada's blessings, because very few of us in this room had any physical association with Srila Prabhupada, because you are all younger than us and joined his movement still later. So most of you don't live in Vrindavan, in Sri Vrindavan Dham. And when one comes to Vrindavan, there is such a sweetness in the atmosphere that exists nowhere else in the universe. There is such a sweetness in Vrindavan, and Srila Prabhupada actually carried that sweetness with him always. Sometimes I wonder what Prabhupada's secret was, how he was able to spread Krishna consciousness all over the world. Clearly, Krishna Shakti Nahi Vina Tar Pravartana. Clearly, he was so empowered due to his devotion to his Guru Maharaj and to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and to the dust of Vrindavan. Because Prabhupada lived here for so many years and he loved Vrindavan. In 1974, before Krishna Balaram Mandir was built and only Prabhupada's house was built, Satsvarupa Maharaj, who was Prabhupada's secretary, asked me to fan Prabhupada while he was taking prasadam, and he knew I wouldn't speak and ask Prabhupada questions, so he asked me to do the fanning because it was very warm. So I didn't say anything, but Prabhupada, in his enthusiasm, he said to me, "So how do you like Vrindavan?" And at that time, around, as Gunanava and Guru Kripa said yesterday, there were peacocks everywhere. It was practically speaking a huge forest, and it was so incredible. But that was Prabhupada's enthusiasm about Vrindavan. So he wanted his followers to appreciate the special atmosphere of Vrindavan, but to not waste time when they were here. To not waste time just talking and eating and sleeping, but to be engaged in chanting and hearing and serving. He really didn't like it when his disciples wasted time. So in any case, because everyone appreciates, and Srila Prabhupada even said that even when a non-devotee comes to Vrindavan, he will experience separation from Krishna. This is the power of Sri Vrindavan Dham. So naturally, when we are here, it is hard to imagine leaving this place because it is so powerful. Prabhupada once said that living in Vrindavan is like living on the lap of Krishna. So close, so intimate with Krishna. So it is so difficult to leave. And the material energy outside is so powerful. It's so hard to remember Krishna, but here it's so easy to be Krishna conscious, and it's so easy to taste the sweetness of Krishna consciousness. It's unavoidable, practically speaking. So naturally it's difficult to leave Vrindavan. But as Srila Prabhupada explains in one of his purports to Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, that a devotee leaves Vrindavan in the mood of being a servant. So he leaves Vrindavan to serve Vrindavan, to serve Krishna Balaram, to serve Srila Prabhupada, to serve Radha Shyama Sundar, to serve Sri Sri Gauranitai. Leaving to serve because the world so much needs Krishna consciousness. As Srila Prabhupada's Guru Maharaj, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur would say, as Prabhupada quoted, that there is only one lack in this world, and that is a lack of Krishna consciousness. The only thing missing is Krishna consciousness. So there is such a need to preach, to help others. There is such a great need. So sometimes we may think naturally, I would much rather be in Vrindavan than to be anywhere else. It's a very natural thought. But how does one get the opportunity to be in Vrindavan? It is by service. And to be in Vrindavan in a mood other than service is actually inappropriate, and one will always remain on the very surface, which of course is sweet. Because there is one enjoyer, Ekala Ishwara Krishna, or Sabha Bhritya. There is only one enjoyer in Vrindavan, and that is Krishna. In the 3rd canto of the Bhagavad-Gita, it describes how everyone in Vaikuntha agrees on one point, that it is Krishna to be served, that it is Krishna who is the center. And even though all the plants that are so fragrant and sweet, even though that they know that Krishna appreciates Tulsi Devi, Vrinda Devi, more than any of the other plants, there is no envy. There is no envy of Tulsi because everyone is simply interested in Krishna's pleasure. So how to gain the ability to go to serve in Vrindavan on any level, what to speak of the deepest level, and that is by serving Srila Prabhupada and Srila Prabhupada's movement and Srila Prabhupada's dear ones. I know this for a fact, not that I have entered Vrindavan on any deep level, but I will tell you one little story. That many years ago, in 1974, Srila Prabhupada visited myself and Jagatarini Mataji, who was serving in, not Vrindavan, but in Hong Kong. Now, Hong Kong is one of the most materially intense places in the world, and there is such a lack of Krishna consciousness. In Hong Kong, the Chinese people would say, Mo Chin Mo Gong, which means no money, no talk. We have no interest in anything other than paisa. So we were trying our best in our very little way, and we were very, very, very young. When Jagatarini Mataji came there on Prabhupada's order, she wasn't even initiated. She was 21 years old, just a child, basically. We were all just children, but we wanted to please Srila Prabhupada. And we were all alone there for so many years. And when Srila Prabhupada came in 1974, he came in 1972, and he also came in 1974, he told me that when you have been preaching for 10 years, you can go and live in Vrindavan. So many years passed. This was 74, and we had been there for years, and I had preached in other places. But and then I left Hong Kong, and I took up some service in the Gurukula, and I was in Gita Nagari in Pennsylvania. And then, almost like magic, but not by magic, but by blessings, I found myself out of nowhere living in Vrindavan. Living here. And then in writing a book about Prabhupada, I counted up the days and weeks and years that it had been since I had been preaching, and it came to 10 years, 3 months, and suddenly there I was living in Vrindavan. So it is clear to me that we have to do our sadhana, we have to do our services, we have to do we have to go about our life and do so many things. But really, ultimately, it's by blessings of Srila Prabhupada, and the qualification for representing Prabhupada is these devotees, they know what will evoke Prabhupada's blessings upon their students, their disciples. So the ultimate qualification for our spiritual advancement is somehow pleasing Srila Prabhupada. So this I know from my own life. Another time, still when Krishna Balaram Mandir wasn't built, I wanted to ask Prabhupada a question. So Prabhupada, at that time, when he was living in his room, but the temple wasn't built, he was taking his massage just probably where Krishna Balaram's altar is. But there was no temple there. There was just the beams and the RCC concrete with its support. And Prabhupada was just sitting there in the sun, in the noon sun, and he was being massaged. And Prabhupada was so transcendental. He was happy wherever he was, because wherever he was, he carried Vrindavan with him. And that is a proven fact. So anyway, so as soon as we came and offered obeisances to him, even though it was an awkward time to ask him questions, but he immediately was so affectionate, and he asked, "How do you like Vrindavan?" Again, he asked that question. So how do you like Vrindavan? Because the atmosphere in Vrindavan is so alive. Everywhere else is dead. The material world is a dead place. And Vrindavan the dhams are alive with Krishna's energy. And if we serve here, that energy reciprocates with us, Krishna's internal energy. The land is alive, it reciprocates. So Prabhupada with such enthusiasm just said, "Well, how do you like Vrindavan?" And Jagatrini Mataji said, "Oh, Prabhupada, it's so wonderful here." And then Prabhupada immediately said, "Then you can come and live here." And then she said, "But Prabhupada, you just told us that we have to go back to Hong Kong and live in Hong Kong." And he probably said, "Okay, but sometimes you could come." So please appreciate this transcendental land, this transcendental temple, these transcendental deities, and these transcendental devotees. And please know that this is a very important gift given to us all, Prabhupada Anugas, all the followers of Prabhupada. It's a gift that we should take, we should relish, we should spread, and we should become very qualified to appreciate. And just one little other part about Prabhupada and Vrindavan. When the last time Prabhupada visited Australia in 1976, of course we didn't know, we had no idea it would be the last time we would see him. But I had the fortune of traveling with him from Melbourne to Fiji and then to Hawaii, Melbourne to Auckland, New Zealand, then to Fiji, then to Hawaii. And I had been with Prabhupada for some weeks, and it took some time being with Prabhupada before you could, at least I could relax in his presence and get used to his powerful spiritual nature and just sort of relax and be with him and be myself and be with him and absorb his very sweet energy. And then after those weeks passed, maybe a month and a half passed, then I went to Los Angeles. I left Prabhupada and went to Los Angeles, and then went to Dallas, Texas. And there in Dallas, Texas, does anyone know the deities in Dallas, Texas? The names of the deities? Radha Kala Chandji. So I was the first time I was going to do any deity worship on a big altar with big installed deities that Prabhupada had installed. So I was asked to do some deity worship. So soon as I walked on the altar, that there's a special experience walking on an altar of Radha and Krishna. At that time, I didn't understand what it was so much. But walking on the altar, my immediate thought, without it going through my intelligence, was this is the exact same feeling as being with Prabhupada. The feeling of being with Radha and Krishna in Vrindavan is exactly the same feeling as being with Srila Prabhupada. And that was the secret of Prabhupada's preaching, is that he carried with him wherever he was the holy land of Vrindavan and Sri Sri Radha Krishna. And everyone in his association, when one entered the bubble, so to speak, of his association, immediately one had the experience of Vrindavan, because he carried that with him always, because of having Krishna and Radharani always in his heart. Hare Krishna.
I want to introduce you, though.
You have to speak now.
Yeah, but then can I introduce you?
Would you like? You're going to push your book. Are you going to push your book? I was going to read from it. Oh, did you do a pitch for her book too?
What?
When she's done, you can do maybe a little pitch for people to buy her.
Okay. Hare Krishna. Please accept my humbly offered obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Agyan Timirandasya Gadnana Sakalaya Chakshun Militam Jena Tasme Sri Gurave Namaha. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Persaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti-vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Piskachya Satarane. So I would just want to say a few words. Hare Krishna. It's just me. A few words concerning Srila Prabhupada, his role in our lives, his role in ISKCON, and ISKCON in our lives. Sometimes it is noticed, heard, or read on the internet that sometimes ISKCON is criticized that we're too focused on Srila Prabhupada, kind of claiming as if maybe we're a little narrow-minded, or sometimes the word fanatical comes to mind. But actually, while we know and honor all saintly Vaishnavas, spiritual teachers, and seekers of the truth, as members of ISKCON, we are bound, heart and soul, to the teachings of Bhagavad-Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, and Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as given to us, as taught to us by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. So I wanted to express something to that effect. Following the departure of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, many saintly acharyas followed, carrying his message, but gradually the sampradaya fell into disarray, and there was concocted philosophical deviations and rituals, and eventually the Vaishnavas were completely ignored and actually disrespected by the general public. The message of Mahaprabhu, as he brought it, was, for all practical purposes, was lost. So Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur appeared in the 1880s, and he was a great seeker, a spiritual seeker. And he wasn't limited in his seekings. He studied philosophers, different Western philosophers. He studied Christianity. But as a divine, it was like divine intervention, you can say. As a seeker of the truth, he came into contact with the Chaitanya Chaitamitra. And this completely transformed his life. There's even some indication that it was through his study of the Chaitanya Chaitamitra that he became fully enlightened in Krishna consciousness. And it became his mission to expose the bogus followers and restore the message of Mahaprabhu to its rightful purity and respect. And he was assisted in this by his son, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. And together they were preaching the glories of the Sankirtan mission far and wide, but within the borders of India. However, in 1896, a small book written by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, The Life and Precepts of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, made its way outside the borders of India, into countries like England and Canada, and thus in a very small way expanded the possibility of spreading the Lord's teachings all over the world, as he himself, Bhaktivinoda himself, was predicting this. He was expecting this. Actually, when we were in England during our early time there, Guru Das went to the British Museum, which happened to be just a block away from our first little temple on Bury Place. And in the British Museum, he found a copy of the Life and Precepts of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. This was like in 1968, still there. So it was into this mood of preaching that Srila Prabhupada, our Srila Prabhupada, entered, and he became the initiated disciple of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada. So as such, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada is not just another name or another photo in the line of disciplic succession, because, as has been mentioned a few times earlier this morning, he accomplished something no other previous acharya accomplished, and that is that he actually spread the teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu outside of the borders of India. He actually, in doing this, sometimes they say that goals, you set a goal, and that goal is made to be broken. So people try to compete. Somebody has done something, somebody else will compete to break it. But Srila Prabhupada, in spreading the Sankirtan movement, in taking the Maha Mantra and spreading it literally all around the world, he brought to life the teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and the prediction that Mahaprabhu himself expressed, that my name will be chanted in every town and village. He established that as a fact. So that is something that cannot be repeated, and nor can it be surpassed. It stands alone. And no one else can actually claim to make that distinction. So it's, as they say, it's a record that cannot be broken. So such a person is known as Shaktavesh avatar. And a Shaktavesh avatar is someone that has been specifically empowered by the Supreme Lord for a particular task. And as such, Prabhupada is recognized as Shaktavesh avatar, and this title and fact remain without dispute. An acharya is one who teaches by example. And Srila Prabhupada never claimed fame or prestige for his accomplishments. If we were to speak of his accomplishments, it would take days and days and days to just go over the basic accomplishments. A couple of years ago, we were celebrating ISKCON 50 years of ISKCON. And some of us were like chalking up, trying to put some of the basic accomplishments, compile them. And it was actually outstanding because you couldn't come to the end. But even in a shortened version, to imagine what Srila Prabhupada accomplished in the few short years that he was with us was astounding. And it was clear that this was not the work of an ordinary personality. And Srila Prabhupada would be very modest about his success. When he was asked, when people would ask, how is it you could achieve this? He would modestly say, I haven't done anything, but if I have done anything, he would say, if I have done anything, it's that I have followed the teachers of my spiritual master, and I have not deviated. It is by his mercy only that there is any success. He was 100% loyal to his spiritual master, as was expressed in Srimad Bhagavatam by Sri Prahlad. Sri Prahlad said, my dear Lord, O Supreme Personality of Godhead, because of my association with material desires, one after the other, I was gradually falling into a blind well full of snakes following the general populace. But your servant, Narada Muni, kindly accepted me as his disciple, and he instructed me how to achieve transcendence. Therefore, my first duty is to serve him. How could I ever leave his service? So there's so much packed into this simple, beautiful statement, but I'll focus a little on the beautiful relationship between Sri Prahlad and Narada Muni's guru. Nothing could ever deviate Prahlad from the service and surrender to Narada Muni. Even when his very life was being threatened in ways that we cannot imagine, he remained fixed and composed. He didn't go outside seeking some ill advice of an ill-informed fool to figure out why was all this happening to him. He remained loyal. And he remained loyal to the instructions and service of his guru, giving all loyalty to him without deviation. So this same loyalty was exemplified by our Srila Prabhupada in all instances without compromise. In 1967, there was a situation where Srila Prabhupada, as most of you would know if you're familiar with his story, his history, he had suffered some kind of a stroke, and he wasn't recovering. So he determined that he would return home to recuperate. And by home, he meant Sri Vrindavan Dham. Even by the Ayurvedic standards, it's understood that if you're ill, you recover best at home because you're familiar with the climate, you're familiar with the sounds and the food, the atmosphere, your friends, your well-wishers are there. So he let us know that he was going to come back here. And it was a very shocking thing for us to suddenly imagine life without his presence. At that point, there was New York and San Francisco. That was our little empire. And I think Los Angeles had started up. But even if he was in one of the other centers, he was there, he was close. You just write a letter and he would immediately answer it. If there's a question you couldn't answer, he was there. If we were challenged by someone who thought they knew more than us and we couldn't answer the question, we could say to them with full confidence, I don't know the answer, but my spiritual master does. And we could go to Srila Prabhupada, write to him, and he would give us the answer. So we were very concerned, how could we carry on in his absence? So a question was posed if it might be possible in his absence, if maybe one of his godbrothers could come and continue to instruct us. Not that there was any consideration of replacing Srila Prabhupada, Swamiji, absolutely not. But we were concerned about being left alone in that predicament. So when the question was put to him in our little storefront in San Francisco, there was a grave silence. And Srila Prabhupada was sitting very straight. Of course, he never slouched, usually speaking in the public, but he was very straight and very silent. And when he spoke, he said in a very deep, grave voice, my spiritual master was not an ordinary man. He saved me. And he paused and he told us if even one person were to come and change even one word of what I have taught you, the whole thing will be spoiled. Everything I have to teach you is in these books. And at that time, these books was the first volume of Srimad Bhagavatam in 3 parts. Everything I have to teach you is in these books. Then he said, I am an old man. I may die at any time. I want you, boys and girls, to push on this movement. So that was his instruction. My spiritual master was not an ordinary man. He saved me. There was no personal agenda or pride. He was giving full credit and loyalty to Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. And he went on to say that if even one person came and changed even one word of what I have taught you, the whole thing would be spoiled. He wasn't trying to be a controller. He was being a protector. He was protecting us and protecting ISKCON in our early stages of spiritual infancy. ISKCON was not even 1 year old by that point. You can consider, would it be fanatical for a parent to hold tightly to a child's hand while trying to cross a very busy road? No, not at all. It's a duty. So one should not become a guru. It's understood. One should not become a guru if they cannot save their dependents from repeated birth and death. Srila Prabhupada saw how his godbrothers had ignored his personal request when he first came to America, even before he came to America, to please come and help preach this mission of Mahaprabhu. The people in the West are suffering for lack of knowledge of Radha and Krishna. Just come. And after he arrived, he still sent letters. Just come. You don't have to worry about anything. I'll take care of everything. You just come and preach. But there was no answer. And in fact, there was criticism. Well, Swami Maharaj has gone to America and now he's associating with the Malechas. So now that there was some success in the mission, their interest would not be to help, but it would be to control by interfering. And Srila Prabhupada could understand what we could not. And later incidents proved this to be a fact. So he continued to instruct us. Everything I have to teach you is in these books. So these beautiful volumes of the Srimad Bhagavatam, so carefully and lovingly packed in these trunks and brought over on the Jaladuta. And he asserted that he was an old man who may die at any moment. And we were never thinking that he was an old man, although he would mention it sometimes. We heard that mantra practically every day. You know, that birth, death, disease, and old age. Every day we heard, but we never put it into the context of our own little lives. And he further instructed, I want you boys and girls to push on this movement. He was leaving the future of the Hare Krishna movement, ISKCON, in the hands of children who could barely understand what was happening then, let alone what was to happen in the future. So it is our good fortune to be counted as his disciples, his grand disciples and followers into the future. And it is our duty to remain loyal to his teachings and legacy so that we may proudly cherish the future of ISKCON, which is now in our hands. Some of you in this room may be around for the 100th anniversary of ISKCON. Please mark these instructive words of Srila Prabhupada and remain his loyal followers. Remain the loyal followers of Srila Prabhupada and his ISKCON mission and take the credit for doing so. One time somebody asked Srila Prabhupada, well, Lord Chaitanya said that my name will be chanted in every town and village, and Lord Chaitanya is God, so why didn't he do it? And Prabhupada, in a very humble way, lowered his head slightly and said, because he left something for me to do. So Srila Prabhupada has also left something for us to do. And he's empowered anyone who takes to Krishna consciousness with sincere faith and determination to carry on this mission, to push on this mission, and further the mission by carrying out his instructions. So that is the order of his divine grace, not to his disciples at that time, but to all of those and all of you who come into the future. That order stands on our head and in our heart. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Now I would like to introduce, I was supposed to introduce myself. Okay, my name is Mataji Devi Dasi. So now, but I would like to introduce the following speaker, Her Grace Vishaka Devi Dasi, who is a very extraordinary Vaishnavi. And she came to Srila Prabhupada with no interest in spiritual life. She came to India just to take some pictures with her boyfriend. In fact, she was a avowed atheist. She didn't believe in God, and she used to preach atheism to her friends. Just like Prahlad Maharaj would teach Krishna consciousness, she was preaching atheism. But by the association, a moment's association with the pure devotee, she had a few moments of association with the pure devotee, Srila Prabhupada. So she came to India as an atheist, and she left as an initiated Brahmin. And she is also an accomplished author. She's an accomplished photographer. Probably 80% of the pictures that you see of Srila Prabhupada were taken by Srimati Vishaka Devi Dasi and her camera. She and her husband, her husband is Yadubar, by the way, have worked together on film projects. And their latest film project, Hare Krishna, the film. What's the rest of it?
The mantra, the movement, and the Swami who started it all.
This isn't some little video. This is a 90-minute, full-fledged, big screen production. And it's going to stand the test of time because, okay, we're devotees of Srila Prabhupada. So anything about Prabhupada, anything glorifying Prabhupada, is going to enter into our heart. And naturally, we'll embrace it and love it. But in the future, when we're not here, that film is going to be there for people to refer to. And I have been told by people, non-devotees if you will, who have seen the film, that they felt like they met a holy person just by viewing this film. I took a young person with me to the preview in San Francisco, and that was what he said. He had no idea. We were just, myself and Kanka, we just said, hey, why don't you come with us? He was just a kid who was working for her husband, and he said, okay. He jumped in the car, we drove to San Francisco. He watched that film, and he just said, I felt like I've met a holy person. Yes, Srila Prabhupada, the holy person. And this film is the life offering of Vishaka Devi and Yadabar. So I urge all of you, when you have the opportunity to see that, it is just glorious. There it is, big screen. I mean, you see Prabhupada on your iPhone and on your iPad and on your computer, and it's wonderful. But it's transformational to see him up there on the big screen. And I want to thank you and Yadabar for that beautiful, heartfelt offering. And to top it off, just before I stop, she's written this beautiful book. And this book is called 5 Years and 11 Months and a Lifetime of Unexpected Love. And it's her story with Srila Prabhupada. And it's very deep. And it's very interesting. And it's very entertaining. And it's very profound. It's a good read. And she's sitting out there every day in this brutal hot weather across the street, across from the Tulsi Mandap, you know, there out by Balaram Hall. So while she's here, please have an opportunity, if you haven't taken this book, to get it and find yourself deeply immersed in Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna.
Thank you for saving the spot.
That was a good introduction.
That was amazing. That would be like a passage of Vishnu. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti-Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharane Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paskyata Deshatarane Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Panchakalpa tarubhyascha, kripa sindhubhya eva cha, patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Hare Krishna. Thank you all very much for being here this evening in this very auspicious place, Sri Vrindavan Dham, and this amazingly auspicious occasion, just the cusp of the anniversary, the 40th anniversary of the disappearance of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Burijan Prabhu has spoken about Srila Prabhupada's mercy, and Malati Prabhu spoke about transformation and loyalty and dedication. So I think all of us have been touched by Srila Prabhupada's mercy, otherwise we would not be here this evening. And we have all felt the effects of his dedication and his loyalty. It was so profound and so pure that it reached beyond all boundaries, not only country boundaries, but also our own personal, perhaps, boundaries of what we felt we wanted to do with our lives. Prabhupada was able to transform that to a greater or lesser extent. So certainly, as Malati was saying, in my life, I was going in a completely different direction. As she said, I was a avowed atheist, and from coming in contact with India, the culture of India, from coming in contact with Prabhupada's disciples like Malati Prabhu and others, And especially by coming in contact with Srila Prabhupada himself, it was totally transformational. So as she said, I tried to express that as best I could in this small writing I did. I thought I would read just a small part of it because it relates to Vrindavan. Mataji and I both were in Vrindavan in 1972 when Prabhupada came for Kartik to Vrindavan, and he spoke at the Radha Damodar temple every morning and evening. In the morning he would speak from the second chapter of the first canto about divinity and divine service. And then again we would reassemble in that same courtyard in the evening, and he would speak on the nectar of devotion. So it was an extraordinary time. It's kind of hard to recreate that with words, but we do the best we can because it's important to be reinserted in that environment, that intensely spiritual environment. We have an advantage here because we're already in that environment. But also in that courtyard, the hub of the universe, Prabhupada would say, where the Goswamis themselves used to sit. And at that time, Vrindavan was still very village-like. So there were peacocks and parrots, and we were shaded by the trees. So I'll just read a short bit. I really tried to meditate on it deeply and find the right words to express that. Oh, sure, thanks. Prabhupada sat facing us with his back to an old brick retaining wall. He played hand cymbals and sang Jaya Radha Madhava, deeply focused, his eyes closed and his head tilted in attention. Coming again into his aura after months of separation, I felt at once resuscitated and humbled and thrilled, and concerned too. My attraction to Prabhupada seemed unreasonable, even like the dawning of fanaticism, and that gnawed at me. Certainly he was my teacher and I his student, but that didn't mean becoming a zealot, a blind follower. Yet my reservations about this elderly Indian gentleman were dissipating. I, a skeptical New Yorker, who was repulsed by even a waft of hypocrisy, was becoming hopelessly attached and subsumed by Prabhupada. Prabhupada didn't seem particularly charismatic to me, but he had something I craved, something I suddenly discovered I needed so much that I could not live without it. No doubt part of his magnetism was his exotic knowledge, but it was more than that also. It was that his whole being, I felt, expressed his confidence in God, confidence I sorely lacked. More and more I wanted to be with him, to please him, to follow him, to understand him, and to be understood by him. Part of me knew that the more I opened up to Prabhupada, the more vulnerable I became, the more I could be hurt. I was scared, and yet at the same time compelled. Hare Krishna. So it was an extraordinary experience to be transformed by Srila Prabhupada. And I think all of us are being transformed by him daily, simply by following his instructions and trying to develop some love for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. It's really a transcendental adventure full of unexpected ups and downs, and an exciting adventure as well. So I want to give time also to my god sister Vishalini Prabhu. Thank you very much for your attention. All glories to His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami.
Om Ajna Tremendasya Ganagana Shalakaya Chaksura Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guravi Namaha. My name is Vishalini. I joined in San Francisco in 1972. 6 months later, I came to Vrindavan. When I came to Vrindavan, it was, I saw a flat piece of land and 4 arches and 3 huts. I somehow or other had the great fortune of staying for approximately 15 years in those early days and getting a lot more association of Srila Prabhupada than what I deserved. With this in time, I felt a weight that kind of mercy, undeserving mercy, is not mine. There's a responsibility as time goes on to pass that mercy on, to pass Srila Prabhupada to each of you who are going to carry on this movement. So I'd like to share with you something that I heard Prabhupada say on a CD just recently that really caught my heart, that I never heard Prabhupada say before. And there was a little Gurukula child that said, "Prabhupada, I'm so sad when you're away. I love you so much. I always feel very, very sad." And Prabhupada replied, "There's no need. There's 2 types of love. One love is material and temporary. The other love is vibrational." And Prabhupada used this word a few times, vibrational. He said, vibrational love is eternal and transcendental. So even though physically I might not be here, I'm always with you. So to those of you who say, "Oh, but you had relationships with Prabhupada, what about us?" He's there for the taking. I very much connected with what Lokanath Swami said, and the mood that Prabhupada has never disappeared. And he's appearing more and more and more. I've never felt that Prabhupada is gone. I was in the room when he left, never felt that he is gone. So Prabhupada would say, to be Krishna conscious means to be conscious. And to be conscious means to be Krishna conscious. So the perfect recipe he's given us: chant, dance, read my books, I'm in my books, and be happy. That's the recipe that I think many of my siblings right now, as we reach the tender age, more or less, of 70, when Prabhupada decided to make such a miracle journey. For us, Prabhupada's teachings give us immunity towards fear of death. At this age, simply by chanting minimum 16 rounds, following 4 regulative principles. And as I once said to Prabhupada, "Prabhupada, I want to follow your teachings with my heart and soul." He said, "You do this very thing, and your journey back home, back to Godhead, is guaranteed." So, in the presence of my esteemed God brothers and God sisters, I feel like a frog croaking. They've done such wonderful things for Srila Prabhupada, and right now I'm focusing on that image of Srila Prabhupada in those last moments or last days when he had a dictaphone pressed to his lips, and with his final breaths he was translating. People want to see miracles. Everything Prabhupada did was a miracle. So, my humble prayer to my spiritual master is that I can give every breath to serving the devotees with heart and soul. And that's all I want to say. Hari Bol.
He wants to ask.
Why don't we take questions? Question? Excuse me? Yeah. Oh, I guess I'll do. Hare Krishna. Anybody have a question or an answer or a comment or a reflection? Yes, raise your hand if you have a question. Okay. Raise your hand if you don't have a question, so I just know you're listening. Ah, okay, good, good. Are there any questions of anybody who's up here? Anything about us, about Prabhupada, and the adventures? Of course, there's big lights in my eyes, so you might have to stand up and jump up and down if you raise your hand. Okay, do you see any? If not, I'll make one comment to follow up on what Malati said. When I first went to Mayapur, there was Yadabara and Vishaka. And Vishaka had just been initiated. Yadabara had been initiated for some time. And I immediately took a liking to them, which has continued to this day. Yadabara had also been in the Peace Corps like me. And Yadabara and Vishaka were, no offense intended, they were normal people. And sometimes that was a little rare. And so I immediately took up appreciation. Then later when I went to grad school, I took a book out of the library. I'm a scientist and I was doing a scientific publication, and I needed to do some special close-up photography. Lo and behold, what book did I use? Vishaka's book that she had published before going to India. And she's written a beautiful book on harmony and the Gita, written several books, and her 5 years, 11 months is very special, especially because it's so self-disclosing. It goes through the struggle of what it's like to really be a devotee. And for Prabhupada's departure, many books cover Prabhupada's departure, but none has quite covered it, in my opinion, with the emotion in Vishaka's book. So, as soon as you're done here, you can go opposite Tulsi, and you can buy 2 copies, one for you and one for your friend. So I just wanted to suggest that. So any other questions? Yes, Prabhu, in the front. Here, you can use this mic and ask. We have it.
Hare Krishna. This is a question from Malti Mataji's talk that Prabhupada humbly said that Chaitanya has left West for me. So you said that we reflect in our life that what Srila Prabhupada has left for me. So how we can do so in our life, that what Srila Prabhupada has left for me.
Repeat the question. Repeat the question.
He told us, my dear boys and girls, to push on this movement. It was like, you can say, a standing order, standing instruction. If you think that this is a big international movement, you're wrong. We're a terribly small international movement. I think there's something like 5.7 billion people in the world. We don't even have 1 billion members yet. So there's a lot of work to be done. And it's for all of us to do according to our capacity. You know. Is that all right? Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Once in the Philippines, just myself and Jagatrini Mataji and I were in a room with Prabhupada before he was going to speak to a large group of listeners. And Prabhupada was just sitting very relaxed and just waiting. And there was some little flag on the desk where he was sitting, and he was just playing with it in a casual way, and it broke, and he just laughed. And then he said to us, which is in answer to your question and very much what Malati Devi said, he said, "It is my desire to spread Krishna consciousness throughout the universe. Please help me with this." So with such a big desire, there is certainly some service for you to do. And not only you, but there's enough room for everyone for such a service, to fill Prabhupada's desire.
And Prabhupada emphasized that if we're really to accomplish something, we have to work together. There's that famous story of two devotees who couldn't work together, and one went to Prabhupada, "I can't work with so-and-so." And Prabhupada said, "That's your tapasya." So one critical factor for pleasing Prabhupada is, there's the old story of Aesop's fables, where anybody can break a stick and nobody can break a bunch of sticks. Hare Krishna. Anything else? Oh, yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. This is a question to Malti Mataji. I heard that someone that that Prabhupada said once that for Malti Mataji that she can cut her throat for me and I can cut my throat for her. So that is the spiritual relationship between spiritual master and disciple. So when we hear this, we become a little depressed. We don't have that much surrender to the spiritual master. So what is the hope? What would you like to say?
Hare Krishna. Well, actually what he said, he didn't say cut, he said slit. She would slit her throat for me, and I would do the same for her. But actually he was referring to all of us. That was the relationship that we had. When you love someone very much and that person loves you too, there's nothing you would not do for that person. He was speaking to his godbrothers who happened to be present. And the occasion was, Brahma Tirtha Maharaj was referring to that first festival in Mayapur. So the festival where we were all living in tents because we had no buildings. And Srila Prabhupada's godbrothers were invited to lunch, and they came, which was a big deal because we didn't really have any place to receive them. Prabhupada was living in a little small brick kutir that you see that is still standing, and I was his cook. But I was starting to feel like perhaps I shouldn't be doing that service, because the situation was a little bit difficult. Not that being difficult is a reason not to do the service, but through the many difficulties, it seemed like I wasn't doing it so well. I had a daughter, I had a husband. My husband was serving Srila Prabhupada. We were living in a tent. There wasn't running water. There was like one water pump, and there wasn't even a cement platform around it. It was just, muddy. And if it rained, our tents were not waterproof, so they leaked. So it wasn't a very easy environment. And as the cook for Srila Prabhupada, I also had to do the shopping. And there was no shopping in Mayapur. It was just fields, open fields. What you see nowadays did not exist. It was just open fields. There weren't even any tea shacks, no chai wala. Meant I had to go down to the confluence of the Ganga and the Jalangi and catch a boat over to Navadvip. And before doing that, I had to go to the treasurer of the and the poor treasurer, his duty is to conserve the funds. And we didn't have any funds, practically speaking. So you might think, well, I'm cooking for Prabhupada, so whatever I ask, I'll get it. But it wasn't that way. I had to fight tooth and nail with the treasurer and then go down to the boat and fight with the people on the way to the boat, because they were looking at, it was rare then. White skin was a rare sight. So, the eyes lit up. And if something was fair, those days there was 1 rupee had a value. Charana had a value. 50 paisa had a value. They'd see us and the price would just be cranked up out of sight. But we had no money. So I had to fight with everybody, everything, just to get across the river. And then I'd get across the river and I'd have to fight all over again with the rickshaw wala, the sabji wala, the fruit wala, the everybody wala, and then come back and fight again. So my whole morning was like a battlefield. And then I had this beautiful kitchen. It was just the open space outside of the kutir where the Prabhupada lived, just an open space. I had a coal stove, or you could use cow dung. There was a bucket with some bricks lining it, and a couple of iron bars across. And I had one of those kerosene stoves that you pump, then it would blow up in your face and, burn your hair, singe your eyebrow. So, then I go to the water pump and get all muddy. So that was the, situation. And in between, trying to take care of the husband and the daughter, and 16 rounds, etc., So I was actually in this kind of constant meditation of pleasing Srila Prabhupada, but it seemed like every day there was something that I didn't do quite right. I'm sure people have had an experience of trying to do your best for something and not coming out quite right. But it seemed like it was getting down to small details. So I was one day I was thinking, okay, I think I have it today. A little bit of pride crept in. I thought, I have it today. And I brought the plate in. He looked, he goes, oh, why so much salt? Because you would just put on the edge of the plate a little salt, some cut up adrak, what do you call ginger, and a slice of nimbu. So he asked me, why so much salt? I mean, it was just a little bit of salt. So that point I thought, I just can't, I'm not doing this right. And every day there's something, so I should get someone else to cook. That was my solution in my head. And as soon as I started thinking, yes, I'll get someone else to cook, someone who can do it better, all my anxiety started to reduce, So the next day I thought, I'll tell him. I'll tell him that I'm going to find another person to cook. But what happened, that was the day his godbrothers came. And I was thinking, well, he's definitely not going to have me cook on that day because the godbrothers were criticizing him for everything, including having a female cook. So I thought, okay, for that day he won't be calling me to cook. But the next thing I know, somebody's saying, Srila Prabhupada wants to see you. So I went into the hut and he just started telling me what he wanted for lunch. So I thought, okay, well, I'll tell him tomorrow. So when I went, I didn't cook for the godbrothers, just for Srila Prabhupada. Anand Prabhu, the godbrother of Srila Prabhupada, very saintly Vaishnava, he cooked for the godbrothers. So when I went to bring the plate in, this little hut had not much amenities. There was one light bulb dangling from from the wires that sometimes worked, and the curtains. Now just look at this beautiful pandal, how nicely it's been, decorated. Well, this little hut had a curtain between Prabhupada's room and this narrow space at the back, and the curtain was a rice bag, an empty rice bag, a burlap sack, in other words. So I push aside this burlap sack, and I'm looking in, and I see Srila Prabhupada sitting at the back of the room, which, of course, it's not so huge, but he's at the back of the room. And on each side of him are these very saintly Vaishnavas, elderly saintly Vaishnavas. And as was mentioned earlier, how Srila Prabhupada was sometimes emanating a very glowing nature. He was literally glowing. The light bulb wasn't working, but you didn't need the light bulb. Srila Prabhupada was literally glowing. And I took a glimpse, and it seemed to me like he was a diamond in the setting. And when a diamond, if you just see a diamond alone, it's very nice. But if you put the diamond in a setting, then it becomes more beautiful. So Srila Prabhupada was looking more beautiful in that surrounded by his saintly godbrothers. But I suddenly became very intimidated to go in that room. At the same time I had to go. So I took my sari. In those days, because I was married, I did keep my head covered. But I just took it and I really put it over my head, like way over my head, like covered up like this over my head. And I got down on my hands and knees and I was holding the plate, so only my hands were showing in the plate. And I'm crawling in the room and I put the plate down and I start to back out. And he says, yes, she cooks for me. And then he said, and I criticize her. The minute he said that, I totally understood my defective mentality. That I was taking, every day I'm literally praying, I want to please Prabhupada, and what can I do to please him? So he was telling me, oh, there's too much salt, oh, there's this, there's that, whatever. And my foolish mentality was taking this as criticism. So he corrected me by just saying that, yes, she cooks for me, and I criticize her. Then he paused and he said, but she would slit her throat for me, and I would do the same for her. So then I backed out of the room. My whole plan was finished. I was not going to quit, and I was not going to find another cook. And the next day, what formerly every day was just like so horrible to have to fight, go to the treasurer and have a fight, and fight with the rickshaw, fight with the boat walla, fight with everybody else. It was like a total different paradigm. It was totally blissful. It was like the bliss of war. It was fun arguing with these people because the consciousness had been changed, had been corrected by His divine grace.
I think it's 6:30, and that concludes our program. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.